anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God. I want to talk tonight about power in panicking times. Bill Hybels, in his book, Who Are You When No One Is Looking, says every single day we make choices that show whether we are courageous or cowardly. We choose between the right thing or the convenient thing, sticking to a conviction or caving in. For the sake of comfort, greed, or approval, we choose either to take a carefully thought out risk or to crawl into a shrinking shell of safety. We choose either to believe in God and trust Him, even when we do not always understand His ways, or to second guess Him and cower in the corners of doubt and fear. Well, the Apostle Paul teaches the church in Philippi that these choices will often have to be made during difficult times. And he has a very strong opinion about which one he thinks is the best option. He's clearly teaching really what ought to be the posture of a believer during panicking times. And for him, it's quite simple as a solution, though it is difficult at times to apply. While it is simplistic as a solution, it is actually hard for us at times to trust in it. Paul says you fight anxiety with joy through prayer, making the answer to anxiety simply this: the answer to anxiety is to pray. If Paul's answer doesn't infuse you with courage or give you hope that it's strong enough to really deal with anxiety that grips us in difficult times, then maybe Paul's why will provide you with what you need. Because for Paul, prayer brings to the fight against anxiety the strength of joy. And for him, joy is fed by an awareness of the privilege to rest one's petitions with a God who prefers that you live with peace. I have somebody to take my anxiety to. What a privilege. Who I take my anxiety to is strong enough to give me in exchange his peace. What a privilege. That God is welcoming of my need to unload on him, and he doesn't care how many times I have to return and dump on him my anxiety over and over and over again, and each time he's standing there with open arms. Isn't it a privilege that he is able to absorb my anxiety at whatever level I need to unload it, and that I don't even have to worry about unloading and then having to leave with the load I gave to him? Cast my cares upon him, for he cares for me. If you're like me, I have to admit, I don't share certain things with certain people because I know when I share it, they're going to feed that part of me I'm really trying to suppress. I'll spend time telling them what I'm thinking, unloading my emotional anxiety on them, how I'm feeling and how someone perhaps has said to me has made me feel. Or I'll share how decisions have impacted my life, and once I share all of that, often others' response will make me more angry, more fearful, more confused. I want to talk to one who I know will work to push me towards a productive response, a calm and rational decision, seeing through discerning lenses. And the Apostle Paul wants us to rest our anxiety with God in prayer, because he will work to ensure that we accept as our best option his peace. My greatest joy is to know that this is how God works in my life. That's why Paul says, while talking with regard to anxiety, rejoice, because the rejoicing is going to drive out the anxiety. Anxiety is never stronger than your ownership of your choices. Anxiety is never stronger than your ownership of your choices. And you don't let panic or anxiety make you yield your choices to it. Anxiety floods. Anxiety ambushes. Anxiety relentlessly saturates, and it can bombard emotions and taint human interpretations. But you and I have to own our choices as to whether or not we're going to give in or not. And Paul says, rather than making the choice to surrender and submit to anxiety, you own the choice. And since you own it, here's what he says is the best option for your ownership. Choose to pray. That our spiritual belief really is this: I don't ever have to feel overwhelmed or like I have no options. I don't ever have to feel like this because I always have one option left, and that's to pray about it, turn it over to the Lord. In fact, spiritual maturity to me comes to us when we learn to do this earlier rather than later. What do I mean? Well, we may start making prayer our last resort when flooded with what overwhelms the human emotions. But as our faith matures, we learn to make prayer not our last resort, but our first resort. Not to waste all the time with fighting the feeling of being overwhelmed. The point I want to make is Paul doesn't say God will multiply peace for you like God multiplies loaves and fish. It's not coming to us as a miracle. The evidence may not heighten it because of positive shifts or moves in hopeful and positive directions. Sooner or later, you're going to have to choose it and then make the first faith push towards it. Be anxious for nothing. That's your choice. It's not God descending with a miracle. You've got to choose that to set my mind and set my affections. Be anxious for nothing. Shift your thinking to make this critical prayer decision. Just as I can think about all the things that can go wrong, I can also think about how strong God is to turn wrong into right. Just as I can think about how bad this appears to be and overwhelmed I'm starting to feel and how frustrated I am that I have to deal with this, I can also apparently choose to expose the capacity I have in faith by virtue of my belief in the Lord Jesus Christ to make this decision. I will not be anxious about this. I will not be nervous about this. I will not fall victim to this emotionally. Instead, I'm going to pray about it, and I'm going to rejoice on top of it that I don't have to live like this since I live in Him. You own your choices in circumstances where anxiety is but one of the options. You never heard of Black Bart. Black Bart was a professional thief whose very name struck fear as he terrorized the Wells Fargo stage line. From San Francisco to New York, his name became synonymous with the danger of the Western frontier. Between 1875 and 1883, Black Bart robbed 29 stagecoach crews. Amazingly, Black Bart did all of it without ever having to fire one shot. Because he wore a hood, no victim ever saw his face. He never took a hostage. He was never trailed by a sheriff. Instead, Black Bart later said from prison that he didn't need to fire one shot. He never had to take a hostage. All he had to do was use other people's fear to paralyze them. Fear, the face of the unknown, he says, was my weapon of choice. It was my weapon of intimidation. And brothers and sisters, his sinister presence and his threat of words became enough to overwhelm the toughest stagecoach guard. Don't you do that. Your circumstances, I know they're masked. I know they're intimidating. I know they bombard your emotions. They definitely pull on your fear. But your God is eternal. He's omnipotent. And he's stronger than what intimidates you. Ask me how strong. How strong is our God? He's so strong that he doesn't give you a weapon to fight your anxiety. He gives you peace that raises your confidence level in him because he will fight the forces fighting against you and let you rest in the confidence you have in him. You hear it, don't you? Even when you're at a table surrounded in the presence of your enemies, he brings enough peace to anoint your head with oil. Don't you give away your progress. Don't you turn down the development of a good attitude. Don't you sour positive hopes and dreams to some masked spiritual robber with no real power. That's what anxiety is in troubled times. Anxiety is nothing more than mental intimidation with no real weapon, hoping you will surrender out of your fear instead of standing your ground in faith. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. You pray and then rejoice that you don't face anything in your life by yourself unless you decide not to pray about it. Won't he give you peace? Anxiety is not stronger than the ownership of your choices. But I think the second thing this text teaches us is, if anxiety is not stronger than my ownership of my choice, then it means I really ought to include everything at every level and gradation in my choice to offer it to God in prayer. What do I mean? I mean, if you're going to pray about some things, why don't you just pray about everything? Don't leave anything out. Don't leave anything out of your prayers, whether it's small or big. Don't let there be a severity of circumstance that takes you beyond the choice to pray about it. That's what crisis like we're living through teach us. It makes you think there needs to be perhaps another option. You know how many people are running around the culture thinking prayer is not strong enough in these times, that it's too big, the pandemic, or too global to be an issue of prayer, or that some personal battles are too deep to be simply an issue of prayer. And you know what? I would agree with you, but I'm going to tell you why I would agree. I would agree if you could tell me that there is an option that brings to your life more grace and power and stability and promise than the access that prayer provides to a believer in Jesus Christ. If you can come up with a better option, I'll dismount the pulpit. You tell me where else in this world can you access an eternity of supply, an eternity of provision, and an eternity of protection? Where is it stored on earth, and how much of it can you retrieve? I would wager to say you can't find it, but I know where there is an endless supply of resources and revelation and protection and provision. It is all stockpiled in the heavens, and it's accessible through prayer to one who only requires that you ask, seek, or knock. It's that easy. That's why anxiety cannot ultimately win in your life. Why? Because you are too close to what you need, and you're in relationship with one who doesn't mind sharing it. And I'm amazed at how turned off people have become when you're around them invoking the name of God in conversation. It's as if it's an emotional escapism to tell people when they ask you how you doing, and you say, I'm making it by the strength of God. I'm making it through the power of prayer, or that the Lord is keeping me day by day, or that you know God has a plan and he's going to ultimately work it out for your good. Isn't it amazing how many people think that that's such a sophomoric answer? TV commentators want to go to the next news brief when somebody tells how much they trust and are anchored in the power and profit of prayer. Well, diagnose me the way you need to, but I'm very rational, and I know I'm sane. I know that I'm seated and clothed and in my right mind when I tell you that the Lord is keeping me.